I only noticed it a few years back. Calling my bank, I was met with the usual choices of press this number to get this service, press this number to get that service. But what really hit me was the initial two options. Press 1 for English. Para español, presione por favor el número dos. Wait a minute. When did the U.S. become a bilingual country? The browning of America and the reduction of whites to a minority status, as we are told by elected officials, academia, and most importantly the media, is a cause to celebrate. When the U.S. demographically resembles Mexico, Brazil, or Colombia, it can finally enjoy a utopian future that is promised by those that preach social justice. America assimilated the Irish and the Italians, so becoming a majority brown nation will be just the same, and nothing will change. America will continue along, and while baseball may be swapped out for soccer, the fabric of the country, despite swapping out one group of people for a different group of people, will change nothing, or so we are told. The only problem is, according to many, including Samuel P. Huntington, Mexicans and other Latinos are not assimilating. They are, in fact, forming their own cultural, political, and linguistic enclaves across the country. From Los Angeles to Miami, Latinos are rejecting the Anglo-Protestant values that built America. And this fracturing of social cohesion is something that the United States ignores at its peril. The U.S. was created in the 17th and 18th centuries by settlers who were overwhelmingly white British Protestants. Their values, institutions, and culture provided the foundation for and shaped the development of the United States up to the present day. When waves of other Europeans arrived in the 18th century and onward, the United States developed the creed of the American, set forth in the values identified in the Declaration of Independence. And after the Civil Rights era, being an American was no longer tied to ethnicity, but to culture and creed. And the large majority of Americans see creed as a crucial part of their national identity. The American creed can be recognized by its distinct Anglo-Protestant culture, which includes the rule of law, the right of dissent, individualism, the English language, and the Protestant work ethic. While contributions from other European groups that added and modified the social fabric, think spaghetti and St. Patrick's Day, for example, the fundamental core that attracted millions with the opportunity and freedom it made possible remained. Huntington asks the question, would the United States be the country that it has been, and it largely remains today, if it had been settled in the 17th and 18th century, not by British Protestants, but by French, Spanish, or Portuguese Catholics? And the answer is clearly no. It would not be the United States. It would be Quebec, Mexico, or Brazil. With the change in source countries for new Americans from Europe to mostly that of the developing world, while at the same time there has been a rise of identity politics based on race, ethnicity, religion, gender, and the push for multiculturalism, entire swaths of the population now have divided loyalties, dual nationalities, and transnational identities. And this is cause for concern for the future cultural and even territorial integrity of the United States. The greatest risk and largest challenge for the U.S. and its traditional identity is from the massive, never-ending tidal wave of people washing into the country from Latin America and specifically Mexico. While Americans tend to laud their nation's past successes in assimilating newcomers, the size, context, and nature of immigration today is fundamentally different than previous waves. But the U.S. looks unlikely to duplicate previous successes, and without any change in course, a united country with a single language and culture is slowly changing into a country of two peoples, two cultures, and two languages. One Anglo, the other Hispanic. One English, the other Spanish. Contemporary immigration from Latin America and Mexico specifically differs from past immigration due to a combination of several factors, including contiguity, scale, illegality, regional concentration, persistence, and historical precedents. The United States is the only developed country that has such an extensive frontier with a developing country, and it's because of the contiguous nature of Mexico with the U.S. that allows Mexican immigrants to remain in intimate contact with their family, friends, and home localities, as no other immigrants have ever been able to do so. And the scale of Mexican immigration Since the 1960s, vast numbers of people from the developing world have arrived in the US, but the diversity of source countries from earlier immigration has given way to one dominant source: Mexico. Mexicans constitute 29% of the total foreign-born U.S. population in 2010, and overall 37% is of Latin American extraction. Chinese at 2.2% are the next most represented group of foreign people living in the U.S. While in the past there was large linguistic diversity of people entering the U.S., in raw numbers, almost half of the people arriving today are, for the first time in history, speaking one single language: Spanish. Post-1965 saw an explosion of illegal immigration. In trying to reduce the inflow of illegal immigrants, the 1986 Immigration and Reform Control Act gave amnesty and green cards to 3.1 million illegal immigrants. 90% of them were from Mexico. With the rise of sanctuary cities, the ability to use social services, lax enforcement, and even obstruction by local law enforcement of federal immigration laws, the draw for illegals has never been higher. The Founding Fathers understood that the dispersion of immigrants was essential for their integration, and this was the historical pattern of all non-Hispanic immigration. However, contemporary settlement patterns see Mexicans concentrating in the Southwest, particularly Southern California, Cubans in Miami, and Dominicans in New York. The more concentrated immigrants become, the slower their assimilation process is. And also because of the high fertility rates of Mexicans, the schools in many parts of Los Angeles have become, in effect, Mexican. In the past, immigrant waves crested and subsided, and in 1924, immigration was reduced to a trickle. However, immigration from Latin America shows no sign of ebbing anytime soon. And very importantly, no other immigrant group in U.S. history has asserted or could assert historical territorial claims of U.S. territory. Mexicans and Mexican Americans can and do. After the Texan War of Independence and the Mexican-American War, the U.S. annexed half of Mexico's territory, which includes most of the present-day Southwest. And according to Boston College political scientist Peter Scarry, who's not scaremongering when he says, unlike other immigrants, Mexicans arrive here from a neighboring nation that has suffered military defeat at the hands of the United States, and they settle predominantly in a region that was once part of their homeland. Mexican Americans enjoy a sense of being on their own turf that's not shared by other immigrants. And remember, there are countless historical precedents for the potential for conflict when people of one country begin claiming territory in a neighboring country as their own. All of these factors make Latin American, but particularly Mexican immigration different. But even more troublesome for the future of the U.S. is the Spanish language. The failure of Mexicans to approximate U.S. norms of education, economic status, and intermarriage rates in the third and fourth generation, as has happened in past immigrant groups, is thought to be associated with the large Spanish enclaves that dot the U.S. The size, persistence, and concentration of Hispanic immigration tends to perpetuate the use of Spanish through successive generations. Koreans, Filipinos, Vietnamese, Lebanese, no group arriving in the U.S. rejects the idea of English being made the official national language. Only one group does. Hispanic leaders are actively seeking to transform the United States into a bilingual society. English is not enough, argues Salvador Sato, president of the Spanish-American League Against Discrimination. We don't want a monolingual society. Similarly, Duke University literature professor and Chilean immigrant Ariel Dorfman asks, will this country speak two languages or merely one? And his answer, of course, is that it should speak two. The persistence of Mexican immigration into the United States reduces the incentives for cultural assimilation. Mexican Americans no longer think of themselves as members of a small minority who must accommodate the dominant group and adopt its culture. As their numbers increase, they become more committed to their own ethnic identity and culture. In 1917, former U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt said, "We must have but one flag. We must also have but one language. That must be the language of the Declaration of Independence, of Washington's farewell address, of Lincoln's Gettysburg speech, and second inaugural." By contrast, in June 2000, U.S. President Bill Clinton said, I hope very much that I'm the last president in American history who can't speak Spanish. And it was in May 2001, President George Bush celebrated Mexico's Cinco de Mayo national holiday by inaugurating the practice of broadcasting the weekly presidential radio address to the American people in both English and Spanish. If these trends continue, the cultural division between Hispanics and Anglos could replace the racial division between blacks and whites as the most serious cleavage in U.S. society. This transformation may not be all bad, but it will be the end of America as it's been known in any recognizable form for the past 3 centuries. But Americans should not allow this to happen unless they are sure that this new nation that's being created will be better than the one that it's replacing. Thanks for watching. If you like this kind of material, please consider supporting this channel via Patreon. Also, find me on the usual social media and check out the website blackpigeonspeaks.com for more interesting information like this.